Hello and welcome to the Sound Financial Group podcast. I am Paul Adams, CEO and founder. I'm joined by Corey. Almost in a blue shirt again this week, Shepard.
You're either in a blue shirt or not. Like almost. It's kind of like being pregnant.
I think what we could do is like a hyper speed reel of all 300 episodes. And I bet in an inordinate amount of time, you're wearing blue.
Blue blur. Yeah.
It's just a blue blur. And it's not bad that you're wearing blue. In fact, it's a blessing that you're never blue. And that's why our audience loves to have you on the show. And today, what we're going to talk about on the show is what you can do to have your money not turn blue because it's not circulating. Not my best metaphor ever. Bear with us. We're going to get there.
We'll work on it. We'll get back to you by the end of the episode.
By the end of the episode, we'll see if Corey has some improvement on that narrative. But the idea being is that for most people listening to the show, you do what most people have had done, especially if you're high income. And that is that you're kind of living your lifestyle and some money builds up on the side. And as money builds up on the side, maybe it's savings or something else, it eventually gets to a point where you say, okay, I'm going to buy something. And, it might be $50,000 that's built up and somebody presents you with an annuity. Or as I just saw the other day, a client had $250,000 built up. In fact, this is some of the stuff that we used in the annuity episode, was reviewing annuity he acquired years ago that he got literally because he had an extra $250,000 and a financial person that he has social interaction with said, oh, you should put your money into this. So it wasn't building up money with an aim of what he had in the future. It's surplus on the side. And then after that surplus gets to a certain time, it seems as though it would be imprudent to not put it in anything.
And we have a cultural narrative around this. Even if it's buying a new suit or a nice new watch or some earrings or that pair of shoes you've been looking at for a while, or a $250,000 deposit in some financial product, money gets hot. It burns a hole in our pocket. Isn't that the phrase that we use? And we're going to talk about a few other cultural phrases. We build up this narrative around what happens with money.
Yeah.
And
it's the banks that tell us all the time, hey, you put money in a savings account. Here's an incentive to put money in a savings account. And one conversation I had years ago with the CEO of one of the largest credit unions in the entire country, and this wasn't off the record, but it was something that was while we were not recording. And being that he really cares about their members, right? No shareholders, just members of the credit union. And he said, the biggest quandary we have is we'd like people to save. We would, except savings are a cost item for us. How we make money is people borrowing. And that it kind of framed up for me, it's like, oh, of course, the way that they make money is by charging us fees on accounts that we have and by lending money, either to us or to other people. So they have an overwhelming incentive for us to spend a lot of money. And I think what you're going to see is how that blends into those cultural narratives that Corey's talking about. Now,
and that's not bad for banks to lend money. And it goes all the way back to George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life, getting all the deposits from everyone in town and lending them back out so they can build this new house and build this thing. It's a great thing to have access to as long as you're doing it inside of your aims and a model that is a game you're playing, not default into someone else's game.
Well, and let's think about what that default position looks like. If you think about the products that are marketed to us, it would be your 401k, an IRA contribution, and 529 plans is what you do. And maybe you would also buy some mutual funds that were advertised in between the golf tournaments on whatever news network you're watching. It's fine.
Or
that's by default.
Savings, or a savings account
Yep. And if you found yourself just kind of maybe either automatically just putting money into financial tools like monthly bank drafts, or you're in this kind of model we're talking about where surplus builds up and then an opportunity presents itself and money gets deployed, as opposed to setting your path well in advance and then not make distributions by default, but make investments by design. And we're going to walk you through a little bit of that. Now, to start, one of the first things to think about is when you ask Americans, what do most people do when they build up savings? And if you ask a large room full of people, what we find out is that they would spend it. And not in some malicious, I'd go out and spend it. But it's like, oh yeah, if I have savings, then of course I'm going to spend.
That's just what eventually happens. That's what it's for. And it's in our language. Should we save up for things?
In fact,
since we were a kid, we learned to save up. Savings equals spending. Don't know why. It just is.
It turned out that way. So now if we look, so I took some pictures when I was speaking at an event in 2017. And on this main platform, I was going to be pretty well excoriating these financial institutions. And when I did, here are some of the pictures I saw on the wall. Well, the first one I was thinking, here I'm going to be saying terrible things about these banks and everything else on this keynote. And then I see this picture and I took a picture of it immediately. I'm like, maybe my talk needs to change tomorrow. I'm mentally prepared to stay up till 2 a.m. and get all of my phrasing correct on this new topic. And then I went around and started taking more pictures. Now, for those of you listening on the podcast,
stories to tell, by the way. I tell people this story a lot. And like, Paul was on a conference and he jumps into a bank to get some cash while he's traveling. And of course, Paul being Paul, he just starts taking pictures. And now we've used it. We've had this conversation with hundreds of people and used it thousands of times. It's amazing.
Well, yes. And for those listening, there's a woman taking a sip of coffee, says, this is my year to start saving more. And that's the one where I thought, I might have to change the talk for tomorrow, until I saw these other signs. Now, keep in mind, this is after dark in Southern California. I'm walking around a bank with my face taking pictures and people are starting to look at me a little cockeyed. But
at least you didn't have beer back then.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So what are people saving for? The sign says 38% for travel, 24% for a home. Then I looked at the next sign, 56% are saving for an emergency. And then the next one, 29% for a car, 23% for kids' education. And these all perfectly designed wall signs. And another one is, what are people saving for? 26% for home improvements. Now, I think if you add it all up, you get like 280%. So this must have been a multiple choice thing.
Yeah, saving for more than one thing.
Yeah. But it is funny that here the bank, the institution, is advertising where you could spend your savings. Now, from what we said earlier, of course they are. Because what are the odds of you saving up all of the cash that you need for your home improvement? No, you save up the first $5,000 and then you borrow the other $50,000. And that's what they're looking for. So let's just think about when people try to budget to solve these problems.
Well, can I say one more about that? Well, just to recap, and especially if you can't see them, it might not be as obvious. Every one of these things, with the exception of the emergency fund category, are a consumer spending decision. Mm-hmm. And the emergency fund is put some money together just in case you need to take it all out real quick. Spend it. But none of them are putting money aside to create your financial freedom in the future.
Exactly right.
None of them are in that category. And so the bank is not, that is getting left off of the side, planting a seed to grow for the future. That's what we notice. Great observation. And what people try to do is they say, okay, I know I need to save more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to budget. But here's the problem with budgeting. If you've ever taught a 16-year-old to drive, or if you remember being young driving, and the driving instructor said, watch the curb, watch the curb, watch the curb, do not hit the curb. Everybody's at least rubbing that curb. But the reason is because the person trying to instruct you is putting your focus on the thing that you should avoid, which is going to drive you near it. Now let's look at one of the most popular budgeting spreadsheets on the internet. And how they all fundamentally calculate is, here's my income, here's my spending, and what I'm going to save, the net, is the residue, the leftover. Your spending is the catalyst in this model. And the problem with your spending being the catalyst in this model is that it doesn't give you control over your wealth deployment. We're going to give you a trick to do that before we're done.
But that's
whatever
the major
tradition has the leftover is going to have less. That's just always going to be the case.
Now, you could put that in any area of life. If you were trying to prioritize time with your kids, that better go on your calendar first before the work trips. Or if you're going to have a date night with your spouse, you put that on the calendar a year in advance and let the rest of life fill around, because it will. But it won't with our money if all we're doing is setting aside what's left over. So
the one other problem is any institution, government organization, PTA, or sports club, what happens to the amount that you're budgeted for an expense? It gets spent.
yes.
If it's built in the budget, you're going to spend it. So there's no structure for it ever possibly working out better for your savings than whatever the minimum amount is that's there.
Exactly. And so we have to, in some ways, the same way they've worked on our minds, whether we like it or not, via narratives, to have us deal with our money the way we've been dealing with it, take that control back. We need to change the order of operations. We need to almost use a little judo for ourselves in the way that we accumulate capital. So this is an example. On the left-hand side is the default model most people are in, which is household income minus expenses. What's left over is savings. But if we want our asset building to become catalytic, meaning it is the thing that drives the action, then what we have to do is set the amount of money that we're sending to asset building first. And the rest of life will fill in behind. Now, if you want to experiment this for yourself, you can do that by simply going back and recalling a time that you had, I don't know, a transmission that had to be redone. Just picture some $3,000 expense that you didn't expect 1 month. You've had that happen. Yeah, Corey? Mm-hmm. Despite all the planning, stuff still comes up.
Right.
Now, be honest. I'm calling you a carpet in front of everybody. Did you miss your mortgage payment that month?
No.
No.
I did
and
not.
Neither did anybody else listen to this that month that came up. And so what I offer is our clients that have followed this path of being catalytic, where what we're going to do is take our gross income. With our aims, our choice, what we want out of the future as a customer, as a financial human being, we're going to say, this is the amount I'm putting toward asset building. Then I'm going to pay my bills with what's left, and I might still have a little more left over. And what that looks like is this. It's that residue model versus the catalytic model. Now, the question becomes, as you hear this, there might be some eye rolls out there like, Corey will get emails. Nobody sends me messages after the show. So Corey gets a message in my little story here. It says, well, all you're doing is telling us to pay ourselves first.
I've read that book too. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm not saying that that's untrue, but where do they have us put our money? Into a savings account. And the difference is it doesn't make you feel any more wealthy, because that money is almost never set aside for asset building. If you're not buying assets, you won't feel like you're getting wealthier. I promise. You build it all up in cash. You'll feel more scared and less wealthy with a lot of money in cash.
Paul,
than you would.
I actually will say, for me and for maybe some other people, it actually makes me feel too wealthy. Like, I put that cash away in a savings account, and then I've spent it 3 times in my head with all the different things I'm going to do with it. And this mental accounting takes over. I buy, a nicer bottle of wine, or instead of a wine by the glass, go for a big bottle of wine at that dinner and a little bit of extras. Oh, I'm to the store with the kids. Yeah, they could have a little treat, because it's all swimming around there really close to our spending money. So there's a little bit of me tricking myself into thinking I have less money than I have for all the best reasons that this can help with as well.
Exactly right. And that's why you're going to see in a moment, everyone, we do not suggest you make this wealth, what we call a wealth coordination account. You don't want to commingle it with your emergency fund. Your emergency fund is there so you and your spouse feel confident that it's like, we can get by. We got 6 months of expenses in cash. We got some other accessible money that could get us a year. If you don't know how to do that, then definitely reach out to us. We'll show you how. info@sfgwa.com. And right before we tell you this is a good time. I don't do this enough, so I am going to do it hard right now. That is, take a minute to subscribe. Take a moment, like this video. It makes such a huge difference for us. We can tell the difference in the amount of plays we get based upon comments, based upon subscribers, and based upon the amount of likes we get. So even if you're not sure you're going to love our content, subscribe for a few weeks. Corey will grow on you. And if I'm not on camera that much, you might even become a fan of the show. Be sure to subscribe, be sure to like, and be sure to take notes on this next section.
Every time someone subscribes, YouTube goes to Dave Ramsey's house and kills one of his bushes. So, it's just, we really recommend it.
They go to Jim Cramer's house and they knock one potted plant off the balcony of his high-rise apartment. That's what we get done here at Sound Financial Group. So while we're doing that, let's talk about the wealth coordination account, Corey. So the wealth coordination account is what we suggest our clients set up. This does not have to be anything fancy. This could be an existing, we suggest it be a cash-like account that you can either write checks from or transfer money easily from, because this is a staging ground for asset acquisition. As one example I want to give, just before we do that, is imagine all the times somebody says, I want to get into real estate. One day, I'd really like to get into rental real estate. Like, okay, what are you doing with your money? I'm putting $500 a month into this American funds, and I'm maxing out my 401k. Well, where's the space for the down payment money for this rental property you want to be a part of your life? Now, by the way, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. People should do a lot more research before they buy a rental property. We suggest books for people so they know what they're getting into. But in reality, if you don't have the cash position to go do something like that, it could be one of those things that you just say you're going to do for years and years on end and doesn't actually get done. Corey, sorry, I stepped on you there.
I was going to say that for anyone listening who is saying, wait, didn't you just tell us like savings accounts, awful, you shouldn't use No, that's not what we're saying. We're taking back the use of these products with structure. Like, we need financial products. Like, we're not going to just bury it in your backyard until you're ready to use it. So we are going to make use of the financial structures that we have, but systems and strategy totally change what that tool is. Just like, Carlos Alcaraz in flip-flops is going to beat me with any tennis racket in the world every single day. The tool doesn't matter as much as the strategy.
That's right. Yes. But
so
no,
go ahead.
You did remind me of something when you mentioned about burying your money in a hole, Corey. It's a funny joke. We'll just give it to people right in the middle of the show here. So this good old boy, he's at a gas pump pumping away, and this TV reporter comes up to him, and there had been some crime in the neighborhood recently, and they said to him, what would you do if somebody broke in your house with a weapon intent on harming you and your family? And he looks down and he says, well, I suppose I'd call 811. And reporter's like, you mean 911? He says, no, I'm going to have to dig a hole. That was just our comedy break here at the Sound Financial Group podcast. So now the wealth coordination account. Corey, it sounded like he was going to dig me a little bit. I better give him a moment.
No, I never know what these are going to be. We don't review the jokes at a time. It makes it more intriguing for everybody to see my face, but that was a great comedic break. So,
yes, thank you.
Wealth coordination account. Any kind of, we used to say a checking account because you needed a checkbook to get the money to move around, but now most electronic accounts, whether it's checking or savings, you can usually get it done for moving the money around.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we're just going to give you a little example here. So for those of you listening, we got a little picture up here, $400,000 income household. And they've set up this separate wealth coordination account. Now, the bank won't call it that. Years ago, we had clients coming back from banks a little confused. I said, I wanted a wealth coordination account. And they didn't know what I was talking about. Like, just get a checking account. It's fine. But our purpose is to not have the money sit there forever. You definitely don't want to be taken advantage of on interest rates, but it's not to sit there forever. what we want to do is handle certain purposes with our money. So in this simple example, the household is just setting aside 20% of gross income. But there are three major purposes to the wealth coordination account. Purpose one, it's the first financial commitment you make every month. To put money in the wealth coordination account by whatever amount you and your family with your advisor predetermined.
And if that sounds scary, that's why this is a cash account. Like the physicality of this is invaluable. And we move kind of fast with folks when we're building this strategy for that reason. It's just a cash account. It's better to just pick a number and go and see if it works, because the worst case scenario while you're figuring it out is you just have to back a little bit back into your other account. That's why we have it be this cash account. You can just go for it and feel it, figure it out as you go and do that experimentation.
And most clients start with more than what they thought they could do, and they don't have to touch it, because what's different about this building up, because you've mentally wired yourself, I'm going to go buy an asset with this, it feels differently building up than, say, your emergency fund does. So our second purpose is to buy assets. Now, when we think about buying assets, we really have to think about, how do we define one? If you kind of picture that big room I was talking about speaking to earlier in the show, and I asked that same room, everybody quietly just write down on a piece of paper and hand it to the front what you think an asset is. I would bet you in a room of 100 people, I would have at least 99 answers that were different than one another.
Yeah.
And that'll only because one guy was in the bathroom and didn't send one in. That's how diverse people are. So we're going to give you what we call an operable definition. This isn't the same definition your bank uses, but from our conversation earlier, you don't necessarily want to use the bank's definitions to drive your wealth building. So something is an asset when you can buy it and it puts money in your pocket now, or has the ability to put money in your pocket later without changing your lifestyle. I'm going to say it one more time for everybody just listening. Anything that puts money in your pocket now or has the ability to put money in your pocket later without changing your lifestyle. Now, as a bit of a rude awakening to many people, what that means is your primary residence. Your primary residence, regardless of its value. I don't care if it's worth $15 million and you own it outright. It is not an asset. Now, just the upkeep.
Right. Well, the other hint is who's consuming the utility of that object. Mm-hmm. If you're living in the house, you're consuming the utility of it. You're paying all the expenses. It's not growing for you. But just as a counterpoint, you put someone else's clothes in the closet. You have a tenant in there. They're paying all the expenses of that property. Well, that just comparing those two, obviously they look very, very different. And that's what we're after here.
In fact, that $15 million home, even if you owned it outright, we did calculations. This is pre-COVID, so it's higher now. It'd be $250,000 a year of upkeep. Just taxes, keeping the yard trimmed, everything else. And speaking of taxes and wealth erosion, you guys can hear Corey's neighbor's house is burning down right now, but that man will not let it interfere with him recording this podcast. And I think it's admirable, Corey. Okay.
That was over with you. No, so and just one more thing on the house, because it's, I think it can be tough for people. Again, American dream, home ownership.
Yes.
We're for all of those things if it's right for your financial situation. But that even if you bought your primary home at the perfect time and it skyrocketed in value and you're sitting on like real math, 20% return a year after you've covered all the expenses and taken everything into account, like you've been taking, that's okay. But to get that value out without owing someone else some money, like a home equity line, you got to sell the thing.
It's got to go.
You're either creating liability or selling it. That's why lifestyle is a consideration in here, because money isn't just math. It's math plus human behavior. And when our behavior, our wishes, wants, and preferences, our lifestyle is involved in the equation, it changes it. It's not just a cold, hard asset creating value for us anymore.
Which reminds me, for those of you that kind of clicked in on that idea of humans with money and math are different, there's a great white paper on that written by the venerable Corey Shepard. You can go to SFG, like Sound Financial Group, way.com. And you'll see one of the forms on there. You can click a button and get that white paper sent to you. Highly, highly recommend it. All right, so let's give people a practical example of how this might work. So $80,000 a year going in, what kind of assets we can buy? Well, the first thing we put on was a vacation home. And to which you say, but Paul, you just said my primary residence is not an asset. Let's go to Corey's utility test. Who's getting the utility? The vacationer. Mm-hmm. And we could still go and use this, say a month a year or 2 weeks every year if we want. But if it's rented out the rest of the time and it's putting cash flow on the balance sheet, check asset number one definition. Number two is that if we sell it, we don't have a change in lifestyle. As long as I don't keep an extra car in that garage or extra clothes in the closets, I've got no lifestyle change if I just rent the house next door the year after I sell it.
You're still going somewhere on vacation.
Exactly right. So vacation home, it does count as an asset. But in fact, I can't figure out how to move my little window, but right underneath where our little face is right now, it says vacation home. Other things, collectibles. That could be like the collectible Corvette in the garage. It could be stamps. It could be artwork, as long as it's not part of your lifestyle. Because if you are in the Corvette collecting, but you have one Corvette and all your social interactions are around that Corvette with the rallies and everything else, not an asset. But if you have two of them where you could sell one, then you could count one as an asset and not change your lifestyle. So that gives you an idea of a couple different ways to test that metric. Of course, real estate can be an asset. Certain types of life insurances you guys heard on the show before can be an asset. Mutual funds, a bunch of the traditional products like 401k, IRA, Roth, all that. Ownership in another business and investing back in your own human life value. That might be getting a master's or being a part of a coaching program or something that's going to make you better, possibly increase your income. Also an asset. But then's the third purpose of this account, which we didn't get to, which is it needs to be a place that this money can reside. Much like Corey was talking about earlier, it's just very easy. You could be in a position where, let's say, and we've all had this happen, some little windfall. We sold a vehicle, got a little tiny inheritance or something. And let's just say there's an extra $40,000, $50,000 in the checking account. It is so easy to just be at the dinner table, kind of sit back after a big dinner and go, we've been thinking about going to Hawaii. Maybe we should just go ahead and do it this year. We've been talking, or haven't you been talking about getting a new car? I mean, we could easily do that right now. And it's not bad, but some of that money gets lost in the sauce of life. In fact, let me give you another example where we get money lost in the sauce of life. For many of you listening to this, you out-earn the Social Security limit of about $160,000 a year now. When you exceed that at your employer, you get about a 7% pay bump because they're not holding Social Security out of your pay anymore. But for many people, because they don't have a wealth coordination account where they can notice their check is different and crank up their contribution to their wealth coordination account, that's an example of where many of you listening have already lost money every year in that sauce of life to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars if you're making $400,000 a year. And it's just right through the fingers. I mean, there's a huge benefit to be a high income earner, and it's also an enormous obligation to be a good steward. So the third place is we land that money back in the wealth coordination account. So if we are going to spend some, it's a separate decision. Like, okay, let's peel off 10 grand to consume and we'll leave the other 30 grand in the account. But this is where we really destroy the idea of retirement. For those of you that have met with us or clients, you know we don't like the idea of retirement. We prefer people build definite financial independence for the sake of a work optional lifestyle. So how do we get there if we don't want to retire? We reach definite financial independence. Now, for this family, it's pretty easy to do the math. They were making $400 a year. They're setting aside $80 into their wealth coordination account. So somewhere in their life, they're consuming $320 a year. Somewhere.
Whether that's mortgage, taxes, vacation, going out to eat, anything, Target.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Like all these little things build up and this person has decided on a lifestyle. It's going the way it's going, but what they need is passive income of $320. But when they hit that, when their assets can produce that, we make the distinction. That doesn't mean it's like, walk away and I'm gone. No, for many of you listening, the reason you're as financially successful as you are is because you have a great passion for what you do. And it's not as if you want to get really, really good at it and then just like, well, I'm not going to bring any more value to the world. And that's why many of you listening don't want to pursue retirement, because that's what it means. That's what it's meant for many, many years in our language. Instead, what we want to do is financial independence for the sake of a work optional lifestyle. Here's how that works practically. Once our passive income is high enough from our assets, we can live off the passive income. And then whatever the earnings are, in this case, $400,000, 100% of it can be saved because we can live off of the assets. Now, sit with that for a moment. If all your assets are producing the passive income, retirement no longer feels like standing at the door of like this aircraft where you're going to jump out with your parachute and you're sort of leaning forward like, I hope this works. Like that's what everybody's thinking in the back of their head when they parachute. But we don't get a sense of that when people retire, because who wants to tell you when you think they're at their crowning achievement and they're scared as all get out, scared as frick. Right. They're not going to tell you. Who they tell is someone like Corey and I, because they're reaching the epitome compared to most of the working people. So they're not going to, how do you like, hey, you just made it. Like somebody sold their company for $20 million. Nobody's there to listen to their complaint or their fears. Same thing with retirement. So in this case, because we now have this option, we just keep running our business, keep working. And what we can do is just save 100% of our money. So now when it comes time to quote unquote retire, I'm not retiring. I am embracing my work optional lifestyle created by the financial independence of this simple structure of a wealth coordination account. Corey, anything you'd want to leave folks with?
I think that's a great place to leave it. You know, creating a structure and a strategy around tools that are already there can just change the game. You're working with the same tools everyone else is, but adding that layer of strategy on top can totally change the game and your results, as opposed to what is pretty normal in our country, which is just money flowing out of a black hole somewhere in a household.
Indeed. So here's what I would have everybody maybe leave this show with today. Just take one of your existing bank accounts or an electronic transfer cash account you have, make that your household's wealth coordination account. And then just start putting money there systematically. If you already got, I don't know, your Edward Jones guy and you're automatically making drafts, at a minimum, set up a separate account. It's not coming out of your household checking. So you're making a disciplined movement every month of your money. Because one day when we live off of all our money, you will be a full-time asset manager. So we want to get you to the point that you're managing cash flow, dealing with money and moving it around on a regular basis so that you are facile and skilled when it becomes your full-time job in your old age, because you built financial independence that gave you a work optional lifestyle. And with that, we hope that this episode has been a contribution to you being able to design and build a good life. And like this video and subscribe and make a comment and share it with a friend. See you next week.